25,000 years. That's how long they watched over us, protected us, until they were betrayed and hunted to extinction. But their story didn't end there. It couldn't, because the Jedi weren't just warriors with laser swords and supernatural powers. They were the guardians of an entire galaxy, wielding an energy that binds all living things together. The Force. You've heard the legends: Luke Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Rey. But you don't know the whole truth. Behind the myths, behind the prophecies, lies a history so profound it would reshape our understanding of power, sacrifice, and destiny. Imagine a time before empires and republics, before hyperspace lanes connected distant stars. On a remote island world Octu, a group of beings discovered something extraordinary within themselves, a connection to the very fabric of the universe. What started as meditation in ancient stone huts would evolve into the most influential order the galaxy has ever known. They built temples that touched the stars, forged weapons of pure energy, trained their minds and bodies to achieve what most would consider impossible. But the true power of the Jedi never lay in their abilities. It was their unwavering dedication to peace, their commitment to justice, that would change the course of history forever. For millennia, they stood as the thin line between order and chaos. They were philosophers delving into the deepest mysteries of existence, diplomats preventing wars before they began, healers tending to the wounded and sick, teachers passing down wisdom through generations. They were everything we aspired to be, and perhaps feared becoming. But with great power came darkness. The same force that gave the Jedi their strength would seduce some of their greatest champions. Names like Revan, Malak, and Vader would become cautionary tales, reminders that even the brightest light can cast the darkest shadows. Through civil wars and galactic conflicts, through betrayals and resurrections, the Jedi endured. Even when their temples burned and their numbers dwindled to a single master on a distant world, their legacy survived. Because the Force, as they taught us, lives in all things, in every act of compassion, in every stand against tyranny, in every choice to rise above our own desires for the greater good. Now, for the first time, we'll reveal the complete story of these mystical warriors. From the founding of their order to their tragic fall, from their most triumphant victories to their darkest hours. Through ancient texts, forgotten holocrons, and testimonies passed down through generations, we'll uncover the truth behind the legends. This is more than just the story of an ancient order of peacekeepers. This is a tale of power and restraint, of wisdom and sacrifice, of the eternal struggle between light and darkness that lives within us all. This is the true story of the Jedi Order. Long before the Republic, before lightsabers lit up the darkness of space, and before anyone had even dreamed of a Death Star, a group of scholars made an incredible discovery on a remote planet called Tython. These curious minds had stumbled upon something that would change the course of galactic history forever: the Force. Picture, if you will, a group of ancient philosophers sitting around a fire, slowly realizing they could move objects with their minds. Talk about a game-changing meditation session. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. These early Force users quickly discovered that their newfound powers came with a pretty significant catch. The Force, as they learned, had two aspects, the light and the dark. Think of it like a cosmic yin and yang, but with considerably higher stakes. Some of these early practitioners were drawn to the darker aspects of the Force, leading to a conflict that would set the stage for countless battles to come. The real birth of what we now know as the Jedi Order took place on Act 2, a planet that might look familiar to modern Star Wars fans. Picture an ocean world dotted with rocky islands, where the first temple was built stone by these ancient Force users. These pioneers weren't calling themselves Jedi yet. That name would come later, but they were laying the groundwork for what would become the most influential peacekeeping force in the galaxy. The founders of the Order were a diverse bunch, coming from different species and backgrounds, but they all shared one common belief. The Force was a gift that came with responsibility. They didn't want to use their powers for personal gain or dominion over others. Instead, they saw themselves as servants of something greater. It's like having superpowers and deciding to become a public servant rather than a celebrity. Not the obvious choice, but definitely the more noble one. These early Jedi faced countless challenges as they established their order. They had to figure out how to train new members, develop techniques for using the Force, and create guidelines that would prevent their followers from straying to the dark side. Imagine trying to write an instruction manual for something as complex as the Force. It's no wonder it took them generations to get it right. One of their most significant early achievements was the creation of the first Jedi texts. Written on actual paper, yes, paper existed even in a galaxy far, far away. These ancient books contain the fundamental teachings that would guide the Order for millennia to come. These weren't your average self-help books. They were the original guides to understanding the Force, filled with wisdom that would eventually shape galactic civilization itself. As the Order grew, they began to establish themselves on other worlds. Think of it as the galaxy's first franchise expansion. But instead of selling fast food, they were spreading knowledge and justice. They built temples, training centers, and meditation retreats across the stars. Each new location became a beacon of light, attracting Force-sensitive individuals from countless species and cultures. The early Jedi also developed the first training methods for using the Force. These weren't the refined techniques we see in later eras. They were figuring things out through trial and error. Imagine being the first person to try levitating a rock with your mind. These pioneers had to discover everything from scratch, from basic meditation techniques to the fundamental principles of moving objects with the Force. Perhaps most importantly, these early Jedi established the basic principles that would eventually become the Jedi Code. They recognized that having access to such power required strict discipline and moral guidelines. They emphasized compassion over aggression, knowledge over ignorance, and serenity over emotion. These weren't just arbitrary rules. They were hard-learned lessons, often discovered through difficult experiences. As centuries passed, the Order gradually evolved from a loose association of Force users into a more structured organization. They developed ranks, training programs, and specific roles within the Order. This wasn't just bureaucracy for its own sake. It was a carefully designed system to ensure that the power of the Force would be used wisely and responsibly. The Jedi Code stands as one of the most profound philosophical systems ever created, shaping the actions and beliefs of Force users for thousands of generations. At its heart lies 5 fundamental principles that transform the Jedi from powerful Force wielders into the guardians of peace and justice throughout the galaxy. The first principle, there is no emotion, there is peace, established the foundation of Jedi behavior. While many misunderstood this as a call for emotional suppression, the true meaning ran deeper. Jedi were taught to acknowledge their feelings while maintaining inner peace, understanding that clear judgment comes from a mind unburdened by emotional turmoil. This challenging balance helped Jedi remain collected in situations where others might falter, from tense diplomatic negotiations to the heat of battle. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge, reflected the Order's deep commitment to understanding. The Jedi created the largest repository of wisdom in the galaxy, gathering knowledge not just about the Force, but about every aspect of life they encountered. This dedication to learning meant that Jedi training never truly ended. Even the most experienced masters continued their studies throughout their lives, understanding that the path to wisdom was endless. The third tenet, there is no passion, there is serenity, perhaps caused the most discussion within the Order itself. This principle guided Jedi to act from a place of careful consideration rather than impulse. While they weren't expected to eliminate their capacity for caring, they were taught to approach all situations with a measured, thoughtful response. This approach proved especially crucial during the Clone Wars, where rapid decisions needed to be made without the cloud of emotional attachment. There is no chaos, there is harmony, spoke to the Jedi's understanding of the Force itself. This principle taught that beneath the apparent chaos of the galaxy lay a deeper order, connected through the Force. Jedi learned to see beyond immediate circumstances to understand the broader patterns of life, helping them maintain balance in an often turbulent galaxy. The final principle, there is no death, there is the Force, represented the Jedi's profound understanding of mortality. This wasn't merely a comforting philosophy about death, but a deep truth about the nature of existence. The most advanced Jedi could maintain their consciousness after physical death, becoming one with the Force, while retaining their ability to interact with the living world, a state that demonstrated the truth of this principle in the most literal sense. The practical application of the code influenced every aspect of Jedi life. Personal attachments were carefully considered, as they could lead to fear of loss and cloud judgment. Possessions were kept minimal, with Jedi owning little beyond their robes and lightsabers. This commitment to simple living wasn't about deprivation, but rather about maintaining focus on what truly mattered, service to others and connection to the Force. The code's approach to failure proved particularly enlightening. Rather than viewing failure as something to be feared, the Jedi saw it as an essential teacher. This perspective helped countless Padawans through their training and gave experienced Jedi the resilience to face increasingly difficult challenges. The code taught that each setback contained lessons that could lead to greater understanding. Perhaps most importantly, the code served as a practical guide for wielding the immense power that came with Force sensitivity. It provided a framework for using these abilities responsibly, ensuring that Jedi remained protectors rather than conquerors. This ethical foundation helped the Order maintain its role as peacekeepers for millennia, earning the trust of countless worlds and civilizations. At the heart of Coruscant, rising above even the tallest skyscrapers, stood the Jedi Temple, a structure that served as both the physical and spiritual center of the Jedi Order for over 4,000 years. Its 5 distinctive spires pierced the planet's skyline, a constant reminder of the Jedi's presence and protection. More than just a building, the temple represented the culmination of millennia of Jedi architecture, philosophy, and tradition. The temple's construction itself tells a remarkable story of foresight and dedication. Built upon a sacred mountain, one of the few natural formations remaining on Coruscant's surface, the temple grew from a modest meditation retreat into the massive complex we recognize today. Each era of Jedi history added new layers, new wings, and new purposes to the structure, much like the Order itself evolved over time. The central spire, the temple's highest point, housed the legendary Jedi High Council chamber. From this circular room, with its panoramic views of the endless cityscape, the wisest members of the Order would make decisions that shaped galactic history. The chamber's design was intentional. Its circular shape promoted equality among council members, while the surrounding windows served as a constant reminder of their duty to watch over the galaxy. Below the spires, the temple's main structure housed a vast network of training facilities, living quarters, and study areas. The hallways themselves were designed to promote contemplation, with high ceilings that drew the eye upward and natural light that filtered through ancient stone and modern transparent steel. These corridors witnessed countless Padawans rushing to lessons, masters deep in discussion, and younglings taking their first steps toward becoming Jedi. At the temple's heart lay the Room of 1,000 Fountains, perhaps its most breathtaking feature. This massive greenhouse stretched through multiple levels, featuring flora from hundreds of worlds. Waterfalls cascaded through the space, their sound creating a peaceful atmosphere that made it a favorite meditation spot for Jedi of all ranks. The room served as more than just a garden. It was a living reminder of the connection between the Force and all living things. The Jedi Archives stood as another marvel within the temple walls. Imagine the most extensive library you've ever seen, then multiply it many times over. The archives contain the accumulated knowledge of thousands of years, historical records, scientific data, and philosophical texts from across the galaxy. Blue-tinted holographic data streams illuminated the massive halls, where archive droids assisted Jedi in their research. The archive's content was so valuable that they were protected by some of the most sophisticated security systems in the galaxy. Training facilities within the temple varied from meditation chambers to combat arenas. Young Jedi would progress from basic training rooms, where they learned to lift objects with the Force, to sophisticated combat simulation chambers that could recreate any environment or scenario. The temple also housed specialized areas for lightsaber construction, a crucial ritual in every Jedi's journey. The temple served as home to thousands of Jedi and support staff. Living quarters, while modest, provided everything a Jedi needed for comfort and meditation. From the dormitories of the younglings to the private rooms of masters, the living spaces reflected the Jedi philosophy of simplicity and purpose. Communal areas encouraged interaction between different generations of Jedi, facilitating the passing of knowledge and experience. Security within the temple balanced openness with protection. While parts of the temple welcomed visitors, including areas where citizens could seek Jedi assistance, other sections remained strictly off-limits to non-Jedi. Ancient security systems, combined with Force-sensitive protections, guarded the temple's most sacred and sensitive areas. The Temple Guard, an elite group of Sentinel Jedi, maintained constant vigilance over the complex. Perhaps most remarkable were the temple's lower levels, which held secrets from the Order's ancient past. These foundations contained meditation chambers that had existed since the temple's earliest days, and vaults holding artifacts too powerful or dangerous for general access. Some areas of the lower levels were so old that few ventured there, their original purposes lost to time. The temple also housed medical facilities that combined traditional healing with Force techniques. Jedi healers worked alongside medical droids, treating everything from training injuries to wounds sustained during dangerous missions. These facilities often served as teaching centers where Jedi with healing abilities could develop their skills. Few institutions in galactic history matched the sheer intensity and mystique of Jedi training. While the galaxy's finest universities boasted about their graduation rates, the Jedi Temple quietly transformed children into living legends, though not every initiate would complete the journey. This wasn't your typical education. It was a complete metamorphosis that pushed mind, body, and spirit to their absolute limits. The search for future Jedi often began in the most unexpected places. While some Force-sensitive children came from noble families or advanced worlds, others were discovered in remote villages or bustling spaceports. The Force, it seemed, paid no attention to social status or birthplace. Jedi scouts traversed the galaxy, following whispers of children with unexplainable abilities. Youngsters who could predict events before they happened, or move objects without touching them. Upon arrival at the temple, these children entered a world beyond their wildest imagination. Picture a 3-year-old standing in the temple's grand hallways for the first time, their eyes wide with wonder as they watched older Padawans practicing telekinesis or masters engaged in moving meditation. For many, these first steps into the temple marked the beginning of a journey that would span decades. The youngling years were far from the gentle nursery school one might expect. By age 5, initiates were already learning to harness the Force through what appeared to be simple games. They would sit in circles, passing floating balls of light between them, each exercise carefully designed to strengthen their connection to the Force. One missed catch could send a light ball bouncing across the room, leading to fits of laughter and valuable lessons about concentration. Combat training began earlier than many might expect, though not with lightsabers. Younglings first learned hand-to-hand combat and basic martial arts, developing balance, coordination, and discipline. Only after mastering these fundamentals would they graduate to training sabers, weapons that delivered a stunning sting rather than a fatal blow. Many younglings learned humility from these lesser weapons, as their overconfidence earned them painful reminders to stay focused. The academic requirements would have made even the most stringent university professor raise an eyebrow. Younglings studied everything from ancient Jedi philosophy to advanced xenobiology. They learned to speak multiple languages, understand complex diplomatic protocols, and navigate the intricate web of galactic politics. The Jedi archives became both their playground and their proving ground, where they would spend countless hours absorbing knowledge from hundreds of worlds. The formation of clan groups created bonds that often surpassed family ties. These small groups of younglings trained together, lived together, and faced challenges together. The Bear Clan might be practicing levitation while the Dragon Clan focused on Force-enhanced acrobatics, but they all shared the same goal: survival of the Initiate Trials. These trials marked the first major hurdle in a young Jedi's journey. By age 8 or 9, younglings faced a series of challenges that tested everything they had learned. Success meant continuing their training. Failure often meant reassignment to the Jedi Service Corps. While some saw this as a lesser path, the Service Corps played a vital role in the Order, from agricultural development to medical research. The Padawan phase introduced an entirely new level of intensity. Selected by a knight or master, these apprentices embarked on real-world missions that often placed them in life-or-death situations. A Padawan might start their week studying ancient texts in the temple library and end it negotiating peace between warring factions on a distant world. This apprenticeship phase typically lasted a decade or more, as Padawans learned to apply their training in increasingly complex situations. The creation of a lightsaber stood as perhaps the most crucial milestone in a Padawan's journey. This wasn't simply about constructing a weapon. It was a deeply spiritual process that could take weeks or even months. Padawans had to locate their own Kyber crystal, using the Force to find the one that called to them. These rare crystals would attune themselves to their wielder, producing the distinctive blade colors we associate with the Jedi Order. The physical demands of Padawan training pushed human limits. They learned all 7 forms of lightsaber combat, each more complex than the last. Form 1, Shi Cho, taught basic strikes and parries. By the time they reached Form 7, Juyo, they were executing moves that seemed to defy physics itself. Their Force training expanded to include everything from healing techniques to battle meditation, abilities that could turn the tide of entire conflicts. Survival training took Padawans to the harshest environments imaginable. They might spend weeks in the frozen wastes of Ilum, learning to maintain body temperature through Force manipulation, or navigate the treacherous swamps of Dagobah, where every step could be their last. These experiences taught them to rely on the Force when all other resources failed. Think of the Jedi Order as the galaxy's most extraordinary career ladder, where climbing each rung required not just skill with a lightsaber, but mastery over mind, body, and the Force itself. This wasn't your typical workplace hierarchy. One wrong move could mean the difference between becoming a legendary master or falling to the dark side. Every Jedi's journey began as a youngling, wide-eyed children taking their first steps into a larger world. Imagine being 5 years old and learning that you could move objects with your mind. That was just another Tuesday for these future guardians of peace. While some younglings showed immediate promise, others were late bloomers, proving that in the Jedi Order, patience truly was a virtue. Graduate from basic training and you'd earn the title of Padawan, essentially the galaxy's most intense internship. Padawans were paired with experienced Jedi Knights or Masters, creating partnerships that would shape both their lives forever. The sight of a Padawan's braid, the universal symbol of their apprentice status, became known throughout the galaxy as a sign that help had arrived. These apprentices learned everything from diplomatic etiquette to how not to accidentally force push your master into a swamp. It happened more often than the archives would admit. Achieving the rank of Jedi Knight marked the moment a Padawan truly came into their own. These were the Order's frontline peacekeepers, the ones you'd call when negotiations needed a little more persuasion than usual. Knights operated with remarkable autonomy, trusted to make decisions that could affect entire star systems. Some specialized in combat, becoming legendary warriors. Others excelled in diplomacy, preventing wars before they began. The most intriguing might have been the investigators' think detective work, but with Force powers. Masters represented the cream of the crop. Jedi who had proven themselves not just powerful, but wise. These weren't just veterans who'd stuck around long enough to get a promotion. They were living legends who had demonstrated exceptional understanding of the Force. Some masters chose to train the next generation, while others focused on expanding the Order's knowledge or serving on specialized missions too delicate for others to handle. At the very top sat the Jedi High Council, 12 of the most powerful and wise masters in the Order. Getting a seat on the council was like being handed the keys to the galaxy. These individuals made decisions that would ripple through time itself. The council chambers, perched atop the highest spire of the Jedi Temple, offered a panoramic view of Coruscant that served as a constant reminder of their responsibility to both the Republic and the Force. Special ranks existed for unique roles within the Order. The Temple Guards, anonymous warriors in white and gold masks, protected the Order's most sacred spaces with unwavering dedication. Jedi Seekers roamed the galaxy looking for Force-sensitive children, their journeys taking them from the core worlds to the farthest reaches of wild space. Battlemaster was another coveted position. These elite warriors were responsible for training new generations in the art of lightsaber combat. The beauty of the Jedi ranking system lay in its flexibility. A knight might spend decades serving the Order without seeking the rank of master, finding fulfillment in their chosen path. Some of the Order's greatest heroes never sat on the council, preferring to serve the Force in their own unique ways. This wasn't a rigid hierarchy, but a living framework that adapted to both the individual and the needs of the galaxy. The Order also recognized that different Jedi served best in different roles. Some knights excelled as peacekeepers in the Outer Rim, where law and order often came second to survival. These Jedi learned to blend traditional training with practical experience, becoming experts in handling everything from local disputes to full-scale planetary conflicts. They often worked alone or with small teams, developing a reputation for solving problems that others deemed impossible. Another fascinating aspect of the ranking system was how it handled specialized knowledge. Some Jedi became experts in healing, using the Force to cure ailments that stumped even the most advanced medical droids. Others focused on the living Force, developing such deep connections with nature that they could sense disturbances across entire star systems. These specializations weren't official ranks, but they carried their own kind of authority within the Order. The relationship between ranks often proved more complex than it appeared. While a master outranked a knight on paper, experience in specific situations often took precedence over formal rank. A knight who had spent years working with a particular species or in a specific sector might take the lead on a mission, even with a master present. This flexible approach allowed the Order to make the best use of each Jedi's unique skills and experience. Communication between ranks followed its own unique protocols. Jedi developed a complex system of hand signals, Force signatures, and coded messages that allowed them to coordinate effectively in any situation. These methods proved particularly useful during the Clone Wars, when traditional communication channels couldn't always be trusted. The Order also maintained several secret ranks known only to the High Council. These Jedi operated deep undercover, sometimes for years, gathering intelligence on threats to the Republic. Some infiltrated criminal organizations while others worked to uncover corruption within the Republic itself. The existence of these ranks remained classified, with many Jedi going their entire careers unaware of their brothers and sisters working in the shadows. Training facilities within the temple reflected this complex hierarchy. Different ranks had access to different areas, with some chambers reserved exclusively for masters studying ancient Force techniques. The temple's training dojos operated on a similar system, with certain combat forms and Force abilities taught only to those deemed ready to handle them responsibly. Perhaps most intriguing was the Order's approach to failure and redemption. A Jedi who failed to achieve or maintain a certain rank wasn't necessarily barred from advancement forever. The Order believed in second chances, understanding that wisdom often came from overcoming failure. Some of the most respected masters had faced significant setbacks in their journeys, their eventual triumph serving as inspiration to others. The ranking system also had to adapt to various crises throughout history. During the Clone Wars, for instance, some Padawans found themselves elevated to knight status more quickly than tradition would normally allow. These battlefield promotions, while controversial, demonstrated the Order's ability to evolve when circumstances required it. Few moments in a Jedi's life carry more weight than the ancient tradition of the Jedi Trials. These legendary tests have separated mere students from true knights for generations, pushing Padawans to their absolute limits and beyond. But while the golden age of the Jedi Order saw these trials conducted with ceremonial precision, they were far more than mere formality. They were transformative challenges that revealed the true nature of those who sought to join the ranks of the Jedi Knights. The trials comprised 5 fundamental challenges, each designed to test a different aspect of a Padawan's development. While the specific scenarios could vary dramatically, the core principles remained constant. The trial of skill, the trial of courage, the trial of the flesh, the trial of spirit, and the trial of insight. Each trial represented not just a test of ability, but a profound opportunity for personal growth and self-discovery. The trial of skill was perhaps the most straightforward, though no less demanding. Here, Padawans demonstrated their mastery of lightsaber combat and Force techniques. But this was no simple display of swordsmanship. Participants faced complex scenarios requiring split-second decisions, tactical thinking, and perfect control of both weapon and Force. A common test involved defending against multiple remote droids while simultaneously solving environmental puzzles, all while maintaining perfect composure. As Master Obi-Wan Kenobi once observed, a Jedi can feel the Force flowing through them when they're perfectly in tune with their skills. The trial of courage pushed Padawans far beyond their comfort zones, forcing them to confront their deepest fears. Unlike the fictional courage of reckless behavior, this trial tested a Padawan's ability to maintain clarity and purpose in the face of overwhelming odds. During the Clone Wars, many Padawans actually completed this trial on the battlefield, proving their courage under genuine threat. Young Caleb Dume, who would later be known as Kanan Jarrus, faced his trial of courage during Order 66, though in a tragically different way than anyone could have anticipated. Perhaps the most physically demanding was the trial of the flesh. This challenge tested a Padawan's ability to overcome physical pain and limitation. While it may sound brutal to modern ears, this trial was essential in preparing Jedi for the harsh realities they would face. The trial could take many forms, from enduring extreme environments to recovering from significant injury. The key was not merely surviving the experience, but transcending it, learning to separate consciousness from physical sensation and maintain focus despite bodily distress. The trial of spirit, often called facing the mirror, was considered by many to be the most difficult of all. Here, Padawans entered deep meditative states where they confronted their own dark impulses, fears, and potential futures. Through the Force, they experienced vivid visions of their greatest temptations and deepest fears. Some faced dark versions of themselves, while others relived their most traumatic memories. The challenge lay not in winning these confrontations, but in maintaining one's center and emerging with greater self-understanding. As Master Yoda often taught, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." The trial of insight challenged a Padawan's ability to perceive truth beyond surface appearances. This subtle trial tested one's connection to the Force and ability to see through deception. Sometimes presented as complex puzzles or diplomatic scenarios, the real test was always about piercing illusion to find deeper truth. A Padawan might be presented with a seemingly straightforward conflict, only to discover that the apparent solution would create far greater problems. The ability to sense the wider implications of one's actions was crucial for any knight. In practice, these trials were not always conducted as separate events. The challenges often overlapped, with a single complex scenario testing multiple aspects of a Padawan's development. During the Clone Wars, many Padawans completed their trials through actual combat experience, with their masters carefully observing how they handled real-world challenges that tested all 5 aspects. The significance of the trials extended far beyond mere testing. They represented a profound rite of passage, marking the transition from student to knight. Success meant more than just technical proficiency. It demonstrated the spiritual and emotional maturity necessary to uphold the Jedi way of life. As one passed each trial, they shed another layer of their old self, emerging gradually as something greater. Those who passed the trials underwent the formal knighting ceremony, one of the Order's most sacred rituals. In the presence of the council, the Padawan would kneel while their master severed their Padawan braid with a lightsaber, a powerful symbol of their transition to knighthood. This moment represented not just personal achievement, but the continuation of an ancient legacy stretching back thousands of generations. However, it's crucial to understand that the trials were not meant to be a single pass or fail event. They were part of an ongoing process of growth and development. Many Padawans underwent extensive preparation, facing preliminary challenges that helped them build the strength and wisdom needed for the formal trials. Some faced certain trials multiple times before their masters deemed them truly ready for knighthood. Within the Jedi Order, diversity of purpose was seen as crucial to maintaining balance in the galaxy. While all Jedi shared fundamental training and values, they often gravitated towards specialized roles that aligned with their natural talents and the Force's calling. These specializations or classes weren't rigid categories, but rather paths of expertise that helped the Order fulfill its many responsibilities to the galaxy. The three primary paths, Guardians, Consulars, and Sentinels, represented different approaches to serving the Force, each equally vital to the Order's mission. Like tributaries of the same river, these paths flowed from the same source but nourished different territories of Jedi responsibility. The Jedi Guardians were often considered the Order's warriors, though this description barely scratches the surface of their true purpose. Identified by their blue lightsabers, Guardians dedicated themselves to the physical aspects of the Force and the perfection of combat skills. But make no mistake, these weren't simply soldiers. Guardians embodied the protective aspect of the Jedi philosophy, standing as shields between the innocent and those who would do them harm. They often served on the front lines of conflicts, but were equally comfortable protecting diplomatic missions or defending sacred sites. Obi-Wan Kenobi exemplified the Guardian path, combining martial prowess with a deep understanding of when to use it. His famous declaration, "I will do what I must," encapsulated the Guardian philosophy, not seeking conflict, but ready to face it when necessary. During the Clone Wars, many Guardians served as generals, their tactical acumen and combat skills proving invaluable in protecting Republic worlds. The Jedi Consulars, wielding green lightsabers, represented a more contemplative approach to serving the Force. These scholarly Jedi focused on mental disciplines, Force studies, and diplomatic solutions. They were the Order's philosophers, negotiators, and healers, seeking to resolve conflicts through wisdom rather than combat. Consulars spent countless hours in meditation, developing deep connections with the Force that allowed them to see beyond surface conflicts to underlying harmonies. Within the consular path, several specialized roles emerged. Jedi healers, among the most respected members of the Order, used the Force to cure ailments that conventional medicine couldn't touch. Their abilities ranged from accelerating natural healing to purging toxins and even helping to heal psychological trauma. The Jedi Temple's medical wing was their domain, though many traveled the galaxy, bringing their gifts to those in need. Another consular specialization was the Jedi Seer, those gifted with particularly strong precognitive abilities. While all Jedi could sense disturbances in the Force, Seers developed this talent to extraordinary levels. They often worked closely with the Jedi Council, helping to interpret complex Force visions and guide the Order's long-term decisions. However, as Master Yoda often cautioned, always in motion, the future is. Seers learn to handle their visions with wisdom and restraint. The Jedi Sentinels represented a unique balance between the Guardian and consular paths. Often wielding yellow lightsabers, Sentinels believed in complementing Force abilities with worldly skills and knowledge. They were the Order's investigators, sleuths, and watchmen, often working in the galaxy's shadows to prevent threats before they emerged. Sentinels studied a broader range of skills than their peers, becoming experts in security systems, computer technology, and criminal investigation. Among the Sentinels, the Jedi Shadows formed a secretive but crucial subclass. These specialized Jedi operated covertly, tracking down dark side artifacts and preventing the spread of forbidden Sith knowledge. Shadows often worked alone or in small teams, utilizing stealth and subterfuge tools uncommon among most Jedi. Their existence was barely acknowledged outside the Council, but their work was essential in maintaining galactic stability. Temple Guards, another Sentinel subdivision, protected the Jedi Temple itself. wielding distinctive double-bladed yellow lightsabers and wearing masks that concealed their identities. These anonymous guardians represented the Order's commitment to selfless service. Their dedication was so complete that they surrendered their individual identities to the role, becoming symbols of the Temple's sanctity rather than individual Jedi. The Jedi investigators, also following the Sentinel path, specialized in solving crimes and uncovering conspiracies that threatened peace in the Republic. They worked closely with local law enforcement across the galaxy, bringing Jedi wisdom and Force abilities to complex cases. During the Clone Wars, investigators like Terra Sinube played crucial roles in uncovering separatist plots and maintaining security on Coruscant. It's important to understand that these classifications remained fluid throughout a Jedi's life. Many Jedi adopted different roles as circumstances required or as their understanding of the Force evolved. Some, like Qui-Gon Jinn, defied easy classification, combining elements from multiple paths in unique ways. The classes were meant to guide rather than restrict, providing focus while allowing for personal growth and adaptation. The diversity of these roles reflected the Order's understanding that serving the Force meant more than wielding a lightsaber or moving objects with one's mind. Each class and specialization represented a different facet of the Force itself, and together they formed a complete whole, much like the Force itself. In the annals of Jedi history, the rank of Master represented more than mere seniority or power. It embodied the pinnacle of wisdom, leadership, and understanding of the Force. The journey from Knight to Master was perhaps the most profound transformation in a Jedi's life, marked not by a single achievement, but by a culmination of experience, wisdom, and demonstrated mastery of the Jedi arts. Unlike the clearly defined trials that marked the passage from Padawan to Knight, the path to becoming a Master was more nuanced and individualized. The Jedi Council evaluated potential Masters through multiple criteria, understanding that true mastery manifested differently in each individual. This comprehensive evaluation looked at both tangible achievements and intangible qualities that defined a Jedi Master. One of the most traditional paths to mastery was through the successful training of a Padawan learner. By guiding an apprentice from initiate to knighthood, a Jedi Knight demonstrated not only their mastery of the Force, but their ability to pass on knowledge, a fundamental responsibility of the Jedi Order. Obi-Wan Kenobi's journey exemplifies this path. His successful training of Anakin Skywalker played a crucial role in his elevation to Master. However, the Council understood that becoming a Master involved far more than merely training an apprentice. As Master Yoda often observed, "To teach, the greatest way to learn, it is." The Council looked for evidence of exceptional wisdom in handling complex situations. A potential Master needed to demonstrate not just knowledge of Jedi teachings, but the ability to apply them creatively to unexpected challenges. This might manifest in diplomatic missions where violence was avoided through innovative solutions, or in crisis situations where a knight showed exceptional judgment under pressure. Mace Windu's development of Vapid, a new lightsaber form, demonstrated this kind of innovative mastery, though his path to becoming a Master involved far more than combat expertise. Deep understanding of the Force was another crucial criterion. Prospective Masters needed to show not just power, but profound comprehension of the Force's subtleties. This meant demonstrating abilities beyond the standard Force techniques, perhaps developing new meditation methods, showing exceptional healing capabilities or displaying unique insights into the nature of the Force itself. Luminara Unduli, for instance, was known for her deeply spiritual connection to the Force, which influenced her elevation to master status. Leadership abilities played a vital role in the evaluation process. The Council looked for knights who could inspire and guide others, not through authority, but through example. This leadership might be demonstrated in various ways, leading successful missions, mentoring multiple Jedi, not just one's own Padawan, or contributing to the Order's strategic decisions. During the Clone Wars, this aspect became particularly crucial, as Masters often needed to command clone troops while staying true to Jedi principles. Emotional maturity and stability were perhaps the most crucial yet intangible requirements. A Jedi Master needed to demonstrate complete control over their emotions without suppressing them, a subtle but critical distinction. They needed to show they could face their own dark side and emerge stronger, help others through similar struggles, and maintain serenity even in the most challenging circumstances. This emotional mastery was tested continuously through various challenges and observations by the Council. The Council also evaluated a knight's contributions to the Order's knowledge and understanding. This might involve researching ancient Force techniques, documenting new discoveries about the Force, or developing innovative teaching methods. The Jedi archives contained countless contributions from knights who later became masters, their insights helping to guide future generations. Even technical contributions could be significant. Ki-Adi-Mundi's detailed analysis of Outer Rim territories proved invaluable to the Order's understanding of galactic politics. Service to the broader galaxy was another key consideration. The Council looked for knights who demonstrated exceptional dedication to helping others, often going above and beyond their assigned duties. This might involve pioneering new approaches to planetary disputes, developing programs to help disadvantaged populations, or finding ways to extend the Order's positive influence without overstepping its bounds. Plo Koon's consistent advocacy for clone trooper rights exemplified this type of broader service. Physical mastery of Jedi arts remained important, though it was viewed as a foundation rather than an end goal. A master needed to demonstrate not just skill with a lightsaber or power with the Force, but the wisdom to know when and how to use these abilities. They needed to show they could adapt their fighting style to any situation while maintaining perfect control and awareness. More importantly, they needed to demonstrate the wisdom to avoid conflict whenever possible. The evaluation process itself was ongoing and organic. The Council continuously observed potential masters, often assigning them increasingly challenging missions to test their capabilities. These assignments might involve complex diplomatic negotiations, investigations of Force-related phenomena, or missions requiring difficult ethical decisions. The Council paid particular attention to how knights handled failure and setback, understanding that true mastery involved learning from mistakes rather than avoiding them. Becoming a master also required a profound understanding of the living Force and its role in the galaxy. This meant demonstrating the ability to feel and interpret the Force's will, while maintaining balance between action and meditation, between the cosmic and living Force. Masters needed to show they could guide others in understanding these subtle distinctions, helping them find their own paths to wisdom. At the apex of the Jedi Order stood the High Council, 12 masters who served as both the spiritual and administrative heart of the Jedi Order. Seated in the iconic circular chamber atop the Jedi Temple's highest tower on Coruscant, These individuals carried the tremendous responsibility of guiding an order whose decisions could shape the fate of the galaxy itself. The council chamber's distinctive design wasn't merely architectural flourish. Its circular shape represented the eternal nature of the Force, while the 12 seats arranged in a perfect circle embodied the principles of equality and shared wisdom that guided the council's deliberations. The panoramic views of Coruscant served as a constant reminder of their connection to and responsibility for the galaxy they served. Membership on the council was considered the highest recognition of wisdom and dedication to the Jedi way. The selection process for council members reflected the gravity of the position. New members weren't simply appointed, they were chosen through a complex process that required the consensus of existing council members and deep meditation on the will of the Force. When a vacancy occurred, whether through death, retirement, or occasionally resignation, the remaining council members would enter into periods of deep meditation, seeking guidance from the Force itself about potential candidates. The council was traditionally composed of 5 lifetime members, 4 long-term members, and 3 limited-term members. This structure helped balance the need for continuity with the importance of fresh perspectives. Lifetime members such as Master Yoda and Mace Windu provided the foundational wisdom and historical perspective essential for maintaining the Order's traditions. Long-term members, serving for extended but not indefinite periods, ensured stability while allowing for gradual evolution in the Council's outlook. Limited-term members brought fresh insights and prevented the Council from becoming too removed from the everyday realities of the Order. Each Council member brought unique expertise and perspective to their role. Mace Windu, for instance, served as Master of the Order, a position that made him the Council's primary liaison with the Republic Senate and Supreme Chancellor. His political acumen complemented his legendary combat skills, making him particularly suited for navigating the complex relationship between the Jedi and the Republic government. Master Yoda, serving as Grand Master, represented the spiritual heart of the Council. His centuries of experience and unprecedented connection to the Force made him invaluable in interpreting the will of the Force during crucial decisions. Yet even Yoda's voice was but one among equals. The Council operated on principles of consensus rather than hierarchy. The Council's responsibilities were vast and varied. They oversaw the training and assignment of Jedi throughout the galaxy, evaluated candidates for knighthood and mastery, and made decisions about the acceptance of new initiates into the Order. They also managed the Order's relationship with the Galactic Senate, a delicate balance between maintaining the Jedi's independence while honoring their commitment to serve the Republic. During the Clone Wars, the Council's role became increasingly complex. They had to balance their traditional peacekeeping role with new military responsibilities, leading clone armies while trying to maintain Jedi principles. This period tested the Council's wisdom as never before, forcing them to make difficult decisions about the Order's involvement in military matters and its relationship with the Republic. The Council's decision-making process was deliberate and thoughtful. Major decisions required the presence of at least 9 members, either in person or via hologram. Discussion would continue until consensus was reached. Voting was rare, used only when time constraints made it absolutely necessary. This emphasis on consensus building, while sometimes slow, ensured that decisions reflected careful consideration of all perspectives and the will of the Force. Regular Council sessions involved reviewing reports from Jedi in the field, discussing potential threats to peace and justice, and making assignments based on each Jedi's unique abilities and the needs of various situations. The Council maintained a broader perspective than individual Jedi, seeing patterns and connections that might not be apparent to those focused on specific missions. The Council also served as the primary interface between the Jedi Order and the Galactic Senate. This relationship required exceptional diplomatic skill, as the Council had to maintain the Order's independence while acknowledging their role as servants of the Republic. They had to carefully consider which Senate requests to accept or decline, always weighing political necessities against their deeper responsibilities to the Force. During times of crisis, the Council could convene emergency sessions at any hour. These meetings often involved difficult decisions about deploying Jedi to troubled areas or responding to immediate threats. The Council's wisdom was particularly tested in such moments, as they had to balance the urgent needs of the present with their responsibility to consider long-term consequences. The Council chamber itself incorporated sophisticated technology that allowed absent members to participate via hologram, ensuring that the Council could function even when members were spread across the galaxy on various missions. This technological adaptation reflected the Council's pragmatic approach to maintaining their traditions while adapting to the needs of their time. Council members were expected to set aside any personal attachments or biases when making decisions. This didn't mean ignoring their individual insights or experiences, but rather viewing them through the lens of what best served the Order and the galaxy as a whole. This principle was particularly tested during the Clone Wars, when Council members had to make decisions affecting clone troops and Jedi they had personally fought alongside. Among all the positions within the Jedi Order, none carried more weight or commanded more respect than that of Grand Master. This role represented not just the pinnacle of leadership, but the embodiment of Jedi wisdom, power, and philosophy. Throughout the Order's history, few individuals achieved this prestigious position, and those who did left indelible marks on both the Order and the galaxy itself. The position of Grand Master transcended mere administrative authority. While the title carried significant organizational power, its true importance lay in the spiritual and philosophical leadership it represented. The Grand Master served as the living embodiment of Jedi ideals, their very presence a reminder of what every Jedi could aspire to become. This was not a position one could campaign for or achieve through political maneuvering. It was a recognition of extraordinary wisdom, unparalleled Force mastery, and profound understanding of the Jedi way. Master Yoda, perhaps the most renowned Grand Master in the Order's history, exemplified the multifaceted nature of this role. Over his centuries of service, Yoda shaped generations of Jedi through both direct teaching and subtle influence. His famous saying, "Do or do not, there is no try," encapsulated the profound yet practical wisdom that characterized his leadership. Standing barely over half a meter tall, Yoda's physical stature stood in stark contrast to his massive presence in the Force, proving that true mastery transcended all physical limitations. As Grand Master, Yoda's responsibilities were vast and varied. He oversaw the training of younglings, ensuring that every Jedi's journey began with a solid foundation in both Force techniques and philosophical understanding. His methods often seemed unconventional, challenging students with riddling questions or seemingly impossible tasks, but invariably led to deeper understanding. Many of his teaching techniques, such as using failure as a tool for growth, became foundational aspects of Jedi training. In council meetings, Yoda's role was unique. While he held no more official authority than other council members, his insights carried special weight. He had an extraordinary ability to see through surface complications to the heart of any issue. During the turbulent years leading up to the Clone Wars, his wisdom proved invaluable as the Order navigated increasingly complex political and moral challenges. Yet even then, he remained humble, always willing to consider other perspectives and admit when his own understanding might be incomplete. The Grand Master's influence extended far beyond the council chamber. They served as the Order's ultimate moral compass, helping to interpret and apply ancient Jedi teachings to contemporary challenges. This required not just knowledge of tradition, but the wisdom to understand how eternal principles could address new situations. Yoda's guidance during the Clone Wars demonstrated this balance, maintaining Jedi principles while adapting to unprecedented circumstances. Centuries of experience gave Yoda an unparalleled perspective on the Force. His connection to it was so profound that he could sense disturbances and opportunities that others missed entirely. This deep attunement helped him guide the Order through countless challenges, though even his extraordinary powers couldn't prevent the ultimate tragedy of Order 66. His subsequent exile on Dagobah demonstrated another crucial aspect of the Grand Master role: the wisdom to know when to wait and when to act. Generations later, Luke Skywalker would assume the mantle of Grand Master in a radically different context. As the founder of the new Jedi Order, Luke faced unique challenges that his predecessors never encountered. He had to reconstruct Jedi knowledge from fragments while adapting ancient wisdom to a changed galaxy. His journey from farm boy to Grand Master represented not just personal growth, but the renewal of Jedi traditions themselves. Luke's approach to the role reflected both his unique journey and the needs of his time. While he maintained core Jedi principles, he wasn't afraid to question and modify traditional practices that no longer served their original purpose. His experiences with both the light and dark sides of the Force gave him a nuanced perspective that influenced his teaching methods. Under his leadership, the new Order developed a more balanced approach to emotions and attachments, learning from the mistakes that had contributed to the fall of the old Order. The role of Grand Master required an exceptional balance of seemingly contradictory qualities. They needed to be both teacher and student, leader and servant, warrior and peacekeeper. They had to maintain ancient traditions while adapting to new realities, and balance individual guidance with the needs of the Order as a whole. Both Yoda and Luke demonstrated this balance in their own ways, though their approaches reflected their different times and circumstances. One of the Grand Master's most crucial responsibilities was preserving and transmitting Jedi knowledge. This meant not just maintaining archives and teaching techniques, but ensuring that the deeper wisdom of the Jedi way survived and evolved. Both Yoda and Luke understood that the Force itself was the greatest teacher, and their role was often to help others learn to listen to it rather than simply instructing them directly. The Grand Master also served as the Order's representative in crucial galactic matters. Their wisdom was sought not just by Jedi, but by political leaders and ordinary citizens alike. This required careful balance, maintaining the Order's independence while engaging constructively with the wider galaxy. The Grand Master needed to embody the Jedi ideal of being in the world, but not of it, serving others while remaining true to Jedi principles. If you're ever fortunate enough to hear the distinctive snap hiss of a lightsaber igniting, you'll understand why these elegant weapons have captured imaginations across the galaxy. But let's get one thing straight. What you're witnessing isn't just a laser sword. It's the culmination of thousands of years of Jedi tradition, engineering, and Force mastery, all wrapped up in a handle roughly the size of your forearm. The lightsaber is more than a weapon. It's a reflection of the Jedi themselves. As Obi-Wan Kenobi famously remarked, it's an elegant weapon for a more civilized age. But what makes these incredible devices truly special isn't the plasma blade that can cut through nearly anything. It's the profound connection between a Jedi and their crystal heart, the Kyber crystal. Let's talk about Kyber crystals because they're absolutely fascinating. These Force-attuned crystals aren't just power sources, they're semi-sentient beings that quite literally call to their Jedi. Young Jedi once journeyed to the crystal caves of Ilum as part of their training, participating in a sacred ritual called the Gathering. Picture this, a young Padawan venturing into ice caves that seem to go on forever, guided only by the Force and the faint song of their destined crystal. The catch? The caves were designed to test them, often forcing them to face their deepest fears before they could claim their crystal. But finding the crystal was just the beginning. The real magic happened during construction, a process so intricate and demanding that it could take weeks or even months to complete. We're talking about precision engineering at a microscopic level, all done through the Force. One wrong move, one lapse in concentration, and you might end up with a very expensive paperweight, or worse, an unstable blade that could explode in your face. Not exactly the kind of lightsaber malfunction you want to explain to your master. The construction process itself was a meditation, an intimate dance between Jedi and components. Each lightsaber was unique, reflecting its wielder's personality and style. Want to know what made this process so challenging? Imagine trying to assemble a puzzle made of floating pieces, all while blindfolded, using only your mind to guide them. Now make those pieces microscopic. Add in the fact that they need to contain and channel enough energy to cut through solid steel. And you'll start to understand why every successfully constructed lightsaber was a testament to its creator's skill and patience. The result of this painstaking process was a weapon that was literally an extension of the Jedi's being. The blade's color, contrary to popular belief, wasn't a choice like picking out new speeder paint. The crystal's color emerged during the bonding process, reflecting the Jedi's nature and connection to the Force. Blue blades, often carried by Jedi who excelled in lightsaber combat, became associated with guardianship and protection. Green blades, frequently seen among those who deeply studied the Force, came to symbolize harmony and healing. Purple blades were incredibly rare, with Mace Windu's being the most famous example, reflecting his unique approach to walking the line between light and dark. Here's something that might surprise you. A properly constructed lightsaber was practically weightless, except for the hilt. The plasma blade created no gyroscopic effect, which meant all the fancy spinning moves you might have seen Jedi perform required incredible skill and Force attunement. One wrong move, one moment of lost focus, and you might find yourself with one less limb. This is why Jedi began training with lightsabers from an extremely young age, usually starting with training sabers that could sting but not sever. The internal components of a lightsaber were a marvel of engineering and force alchemy working in harmony. You had your primary crystal chamber, power cell, focusing rings, energy gate, emitter matrix, and enough control circuits to fill a small data pad. All these components had to work in perfect synchronization, contained within a hilt that could withstand everything from explosive decompression to being dropped down a reactor shaft. Yes, that happened more often than you'd think. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of lightsabers was their ability to grow and change with their wielders. A Jedi might modify their lightsaber dozens of times throughout their life, adjusting the grip, changing the focusing crystal arrangement, or even completely rebuilding it after gaining new insights or experiences. Each modification was a reflection of their growing understanding of both the Force and themselves. During the Clone Wars, lightsaber construction took on new significance. With the galaxy in chaos and access to crystal caves limited, creating and maintaining these weapons became more challenging than ever. Some Jedi began incorporating modifications for military applications, waterproof seals, enhanced power cells, and even secondary crystals for increased blade stability. Yet through it all, the fundamental nature of the lightsaber as a symbol of the Jedi remained unchanged. The sound of a lightsaber wasn't just for show either. The distinctive hum was actually the result of plasma contained within a magnetic field, creating an energy loop that produced that iconic sound. Each saber's sound was slightly different, as unique as a fingerprint, depending on its construction and crystal configuration. Experienced Jedi could often identify familiar blades by sound alone. Imagine recognizing your friend's voice, but it's the voice of a plasma sword. Picture, if you will, the most overqualified peacekeepers in galactic history. Monks with supernatural powers, carrying plasma swords, who could read minds and move objects with a thought, and their day job was basically solving space politics. The Jedi's role in the Galactic Republic was a fascinating paradox. Warrior monks serving as diplomats, mystic philosophers acting as military generals, and peace-loving monastics who just happened to be really good at combat. Let's be clear about one thing. The Jedi weren't technically part of the Republic government. They were more like that incredibly competent friend you call whenever everything's going wrong. Need someone to negotiate a trade dispute? Call the Jedi. Separatist movement threatening to tear apart your system? Better get the Jedi on the comm. Pirates raiding your shipping lanes? You guessed it. Time to submit a request to the Jedi Council. The average day for a Jedi serving the Republic could range from mind-numbingly bureaucratic to absolutely explosive. One morning, you might be mediating a dispute about water rights on an outer rim agriculture world, and by afternoon, you're deflecting blaster fire while escorting a senator through an assassination attempt. Talk about work-life balance. As Obi-Wan Kenobi once quipped during a particularly chaotic mission, "Why do I get the feeling you're going to be the death of me?" A sentiment probably shared by many Jedi after particularly interesting assignments. Their role as peacekeepers was perhaps their most fundamental function. But this wasn't just about stopping fights, though they did plenty of that. Jedi peacekeeping was about understanding the deeper currents of conflict and addressing root causes. A Jedi might spend months on a single planet, not fighting at all, but rather listening, observing, and gently guiding opposing factions toward common ground. They were trained to see beyond immediate conflicts to the broader patterns of the Force, which often revealed solutions that neither side had considered. The diplomatic side of Jedi service was far more complex than simply being glorified negotiators. Jedi brought something unique to diplomatic missions, a combination of absolute neutrality and supernatural insight. Imagine trying to lie to someone who can sense your emotions and possibly even read your surface thoughts. Now imagine trying to maintain a dishonest negotiating position when that same person has centuries of diplomatic experience to draw upon. This is why many diplomatic missions specifically requested Jedi presence. Their ability to cut through deception and get to the heart of matters was unparalleled. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Jedi's role as warriors was never supposed to be their primary function. Fighting ability was seen as a last resort, a reluctant but necessary skill for maintaining peace. As Master Yoda often emphasized, wars not make one great. Yet paradoxically, the Jedi's reputation as unparalleled warriors often prevented violence. The mere presence of a single Jedi was usually enough to make potential troublemakers reconsider their life choices. After all, who wants to start a fight with someone who can deflect blaster bolts with their eyes closed? The Clone Wars changed everything. Suddenly, these philosophers and peacekeepers were thrust into roles as military generals, leading vast armies of clone troopers across the galaxy. It was a transformation that many Jedi struggled with, trying to balance their peaceful principles with the necessities of warfare. Picture Master Plo Koon, known for his compassion and wisdom, having to make strategic decisions that would send troops he cared deeply about into battle. Or consider Ki-Adi-Mundi, a thoughtful scholar, adapting his diplomatic skills to military strategy. The Jedi's involvement in the Republic's justice system was equally nuanced. They weren't police, though they often worked with law enforcement, and they weren't judges, though their insights were highly valued in judicial proceedings. Instead, they served as a sort of moral compass for the Republic's legal system, often being called in when standard law enforcement was insufficient, or when cases had broader implications for galactic peace. Their relationship with the Galactic Senate was complicated, to say the least. While the Jedi served the Republic, they weren't subservient to it. They maintained their independence, sometimes declining Senate requests that conflicted with their principles. This led to occasional tension, particularly when political interests clashed with what the Jedi perceived as their broader mandate to serve the Force and maintain balance in the galaxy. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant wasn't just their headquarters, it was a symbol of their role in Republic society. Standing prominently near the Senate building, it represented the Jedi's position as guardians of peace and justice. The temple served as a center of learning, a diplomatic neutral ground, and occasionally a fortress. Its archives contained knowledge gathered from thousands of years of Jedi service to the Republic, making it an invaluable resource for solving current challenges. During times of crisis, the Jedi's role became even more vital. They acted as first responders to major disasters, using their abilities to save lives and minimize damage. Their presence during humanitarian crises wasn't just about moving rubble with the Force, though that certainly helped. It was about bringing hope and stability to chaotic situations. A Jedi's arrival often meant the difference between panic and ordered evacuation, between despair and resilience. The scope of their service was truly staggering. On any given day, Jedi might be found investigating criminal conspiracies on Coruscant's lower levels, negotiating peace treaties in the Mid-Rim, protecting relief convoys in war zones, or exploring mysterious Force phenomena in the unknown regions. This breadth of responsibility required Jedi to be incredibly adaptable, equally comfortable in royal palaces and refugee camps. Imagine being the most powerful peacekeeping force in the galaxy one day and becoming extinct the next. The fall of the Jedi Order wasn't just a tragedy, it was a masterclass in dramatic irony that would make even the most pessimistic Coruscant theater critic wince. Here were the guardians of peace and justice, the most force-sensitive beings in the galaxy, and yet they never saw their own destruction coming until it was far too late. The tragedy of the Jedi Order is that they were playing Dejarik, while Palpatine was playing a completely different game. While they were busy fighting battles across the galaxy, their true enemy was sitting in a cushy office right next to their temple, probably sipping Coruscant's finest tea while plotting their demise. As Master Yoda would later reflect, their arrogance had blinded them to the darkness growing right under their noses. Let's set the scene. The Clone Wars are raging. The Jedi, spread thin across the galaxy, are leading armies of clone troopers, soldiers they've fought beside, bled with, and come to trust implicitly. These relationships weren't just professional, they were personal. Plo Koon called his troops Plo's Bros. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Commander Cody had a friendship that seemed unshakable. Master Depa Billaba and her Padawan Caleb Dume, later known as Kanan Jarrus, treated their clone unit like family. And that's what made Order 66 so devastatingly effective. It wasn't just the suddenness of the attack, it was the betrayal. Imagine fighting alongside someone for years, saving each other's lives countless times, sharing meals and jokes and hardships, only to have them turn their weapons on you without warning or hesitation. The clone troopers, those loyal soldiers who had become as close as brothers to many Jedi, became their executioners in an instant. The horror of Order 66 wasn't just in its efficiency, it was in its totality. Across the galaxy, in countless battles and missions, clone troopers received the same command: execute Order 66. And just like that, the bonds of brotherhood forged in combat meant nothing. Master Ki-Adi-Mundi, leading a charge on Megiddo, barely had time to turn around before his own troops gunned him down. Plo Koon's fighter was shot out of the Cato Nemoidia sky by the very pilots he had personally trained. Stas Ali was blasted off her speeder bike on Saleucami by troops who had been following her orders moments before. But perhaps the most heartbreaking moments were the ones involving the younglings. The Jedi Temple, once a sanctuary of learning and peace, became a tomb. Imagine being a child, trained all your life to trust in the Force and the wisdom of the Masters, only to see that trust shattered in the most violent way possible. The security recordings would later show something that even hardened soldiers found difficult to watch. Anakin Skywalker, the supposed chosen one, leading the 501st Legion into the temple, and, well, some stories are too dark even for this telling. Not all Jedi died in the initial assault, of course. Some survived through skill, some through luck, and some through the sacrifice of others. Caleb Dume survived because his master, Depa Billaba, gave her life to buy him time to escape. Others, like Jocasta Nu, managed to save crucial artifacts and knowledge before disappearing into the galaxy's shadows. Each survivor carried not just the trauma of that night, but the weight of their entire destroyed culture on their shoulders. The aftermath was almost as brutal as the initial purge. The Empire didn't just want the Jedi dead. They wanted them erased from history. Temples were destroyed or converted, records were altered or deleted, and a massive propaganda campaign painted the Jedi as traitors and conspirators. Imagine having your entire culture, your way of life, your very belief system not just destroyed, but deliberately twisted into something unrecognizable. The hunt for surviving Jedi continued for years. The Empire created the Inquisitorius, former Jedi turned to the dark side, trained specifically to hunt down their former brothers and sisters. These dark side warriors were particularly effective because they knew Jedi techniques, could recognize Jedi behaviors, and understood how a fugitive Jedi might try to hide. It was like being hunted by your own shadow. Some survivors chose paths of complete isolation. Obi-Wan Kenobi became a hermit on Tatooine, watching over Luke Skywalker from afar. Yoda retreated to the swamps of Dagobah, so deeply immersed in the Force that his presence was masked by the planet's natural dark side energies. Others, like Jedi Master Uvel, created hidden caches of Jedi knowledge and artifacts, hoping that someday the Order might rise again. The psychological impact on the survivors was profound. Many struggled with survivors' guilt. Guilt over not seeing the threat sooner, guilt over those they couldn't save. Some questioned everything they had ever believed about the Force. How could they not have sensed such darkness? How could the Force allow its most devoted servants to be destroyed so completely? These questions would haunt the survivors for decades to come. But perhaps the most lasting impact was on the galaxy itself. Imagine a universe where the primary force for justice and peace was suddenly removed. The power vacuum left by the Jedi's destruction allowed the Empire to consolidate its power quickly and effectively. Worlds that might have once called on the Jedi for help now had nowhere to turn. The loss of the Jedi wasn't just the loss of powerful warriors. It was the loss of mediators, peacekeepers, and champions of justice. Imagine trying to rebuild an ancient religious order with nothing but 3 days of training from a swamp-dwelling hermit and some dusty old books. That was basically Luke Skywalker's starting point. Talk about being thrown into the deep end of the galaxy. The reconstruction of the Jedi Order wasn't just a challenge. It was like trying to rebuild a Star Destroyer with nothing but spare pod racer parts and optimism. Luke's journey from farm boy turned hero to reluctant Grand Master is probably the greatest example of learning on the job in galactic history. Here's a guy who went from moisture farming to trying to resurrect an entire mystic tradition in less time than it takes some people to finish school. And the best part, his main sources of Jedi wisdom were a ghost, a few scattered holocrons, and whatever fragments of knowledge he could scrounge up from the Empire's aggressive spring cleaning of Jedi history. The challenges were, well, let's just say substantial would be the understatement of the millennium. First off, most of the galaxy thought the Jedi were either myths, traitors, or both. Try recruiting for that. Hey, want to join my ancient order of peacekeepers that everyone thinks either never existed or tried to overthrow the government? Surprisingly, there were still people willing to sign up. But Luke had something the old order didn't: a fresh perspective untainted by centuries of tradition. He wasn't bound by the rigid structures and sometimes questionable decisions of the past. Where the old order had strict rules about attachment and emotion, Luke's experiences taught him that love and connection could be sources of strength rather than weakness. After all, It was his faith in his father's inherent goodness that helped bring down the Empire, not detachment. The new Jedi Order's early days were a fascinating mix of tradition and innovation. Luke had to basically reconstruct Jedi training from scratch. Imagine trying to teach someone to swim when you've only just figured it out yourself. But in some ways, this was an advantage. Every success, every failure, every "wait, maybe we shouldn't try that again" moment helped shape a new understanding of what it meant to be a Jedi. Finding Force-sensitive individuals was another interesting challenge. In the old days, the Order had systems in place to identify potential Jedi from birth. Luke, he had to rely on what we might call the notice something weird happening method. Some students found him, drawn by rumors or their own awakening Force sensitivity. Others he discovered during his travels, often in the most unexpected places. Each new student brought their own understanding of the Force, their own strengths, and yes, their own complications. The training facility Luke established wasn't anything like the grand Jedi Temple of old. No towering spires or massive archives here, just a collection of structures where students could learn, practice, and occasionally blow things up with poorly controlled Force pushes. But what it lacked in grandeur, it made up for in spirit. This was a place of new beginnings, where the Force wasn't just studied, it was rediscovered. Luke's teaching methods were, let's say, unconventional by old Jedi standards. Need to learn levitation? Try stacking rocks while standing on your head. Want to understand the Force? Here's a blindfold and some training remotes. Good luck. But underneath the seemingly random exercises was a deeper wisdom. Luke understood that each student needed to find their own path to understanding the Force, just as he had. Of course, not everything was smooth sailing. The shadow of the dark side still loomed, and with fewer experienced masters around to help guide students, the risks of straying from the light were significant. Luke had to learn how to handle these challenges largely through trial and error, which, as you might imagine, led to some rather interesting situations. Then came Ben Solo, and well, that's where things got complicated. Luke's nephew and most promising student carried both the Skywalker legacy and its tendency for dramatic family conflicts. The destruction of Luke's temple and the loss of his students was a devastating blow, leading to his self-imposed exile on Ahch-To. It was history repeating itself, but with a cruel twist. This time, the Jedi Master chose isolation not just to hide, but to prevent what he saw as the cycle of Jedi failure. Enter Rey, a scavenger from Jakku, who turned out to be the galaxy's biggest surprise Force-sensitive since Luke himself. Her journey to becoming a Jedi was even more unconventional than Luke's, if that's possible. Training with both Luke and Leia, accessing ancient Jedi texts, and eventually connecting with the spirits of all the Jedi who came before. Talk about a unique curriculum. Rey's eventual role in re-establishing the Jedi Order represented yet another fresh start, but with the benefit of learning from both the Ancient Order's mistakes and Luke's experiences. She carried the legacy of all the Jedi, but with the freedom to forge a new path. No pressure, right? Just rebuilding an ancient order for the third time while trying to figure out your own place in the galaxy. Let's talk about power. And no, we're not discussing midi-chlorian counts, though someone really should have double-checked Anakin's test results. When we look at the most powerful Jedi in history, we're not just measuring who could lift the biggest rocks or swing a lightsaber the fastest. We're talking about individuals who could reshape battlefields, alter destinies, and occasionally bend the very fabric of the Force itself. These weren't just powerful Jedi. They were forces of nature in robes. Let's start with the obvious. Master Yoda, the little green powerhouse who spent 900 years making other Jedi look like they were playing with toy lightsabers. Here's a being who could lift an X-wing from a swamp with the same effort most of us use to lift a cup of coffee. But Yoda's true power wasn't in the spectacular displays. It was in his profound understanding of the Force. This was someone who could sense disturbances across the galaxy, deflect Force lightning with his bare hands, talk about a party trick, and maintain such control that even in his most powerful moments, he never lost his connection to the light side. Remember that time he casually walked into the Senate building and took on Emperor Palpatine himself? The resulting duel wasn't just a fight. It was like watching two forces of nature play catch with Senate pods. And yet Yoda's greatest display of power might have been his wisdom in knowing when not to use his abilities. As he often said, size matters not, though try telling that to anyone who ever saw him in action. Then there's Mace Windu, the only Jedi who looked at the dark side and said, "That's cute, let me show you how it's done." Windu created his own lightsaber form, Vapad, which basically channeled his opponent's darkness right back at them. Imagine being so powerful that you could turn the dark side into a cosmic game of stop hitting yourself. His battle with Palpatine proved he could go toe-to-toe with the most powerful Sith Lord in history, and he would have won if not for a certain dramatic youngling with anger management issues. Speaking of which, Anakin Skywalker. Oh boy, where do we even start? The Chosen One, the hero with no fear, the guy who looked at midi-chlorian records and broke them so thoroughly they had to create new ways to measure Force potential. Anakin wasn't just powerful, he was power personified. This was someone who could pilot anything that flew, and some things that probably shouldn't, win impossible battles, and perform Force feats that made other Jedi look like they were still in youngling training. The scary part? We never saw peak Anakin as a Jedi. All those incredible feats during the Clone Wars, that was just warm-up Anakin. Before he could reach his full potential, he took a tragic detour into black armor and heavy breathing. But even then, the raw power was undeniable. This was someone who could force choke people through video calls. Luke Skywalker might have started as a farm boy, but he ended up redefining what a Jedi could be. His power grew so dramatically that by the time of the New Republic, he was pulling off stunts that would have made the old council drop their robes in shock. Remember that time he projected himself across the galaxy so convincingly that he could interact with physical objects? That's the kind of power that makes you wonder if he was reading from a different Force instruction manual than everyone else. But Luke's greatest power wasn't in the spectacular displays, it was in his ability to see light in the darkness. This was someone who could sense the good in Darth Vader when everyone else in the galaxy had written him off as a lost cause. That's not just Force sensitivity, that's emotional intelligence cranked up to hyperspace levels. Then there's Rey, whose raw power was so intense she was accidentally pulling off mind tricks before she even knew what a Jedi was. Talk about a steep learning curve. She went from what's the Force to lifting several tons of rocks in less time than it takes most Padawans to learn proper lightsaber grip. By the end of her journey, she was channeling the power of all the Jedi who came before, a feat that would have made even Yoda raise his ears in surprise. Some honorable mentions? Ki-Adi-Mundi, whose tactical genius was matched only by his Force abilities. Plo Koon, who could use a rare form of Force lightning that actually came from the light side. Obi-Wan Kenobi, who might not have been the most naturally powerful, but whose mastery and control made him one of the most formidable Jedi in history. This was someone who could take on a powered-up Anakin at his peak and win with the high ground, of course. And let's not forget Quinlan Vos, whose psychometric abilities let him read object memories so well he could probably tell you what a rock had for breakfast. Or Aayla Secura, whose connection to the living force was so strong she could communicate with entire ecosystems. Each of these Jedi brought their own unique flavor of incredible to the Force power potluck. But here's the thing about power in the Jedi Order. It was never just about raw ability. The most powerful Jedi weren't necessarily the ones who could lift the biggest ships or win the most battles. True power came from understanding the Force, knowing when to use it, and most importantly, knowing when not to. As Yoda would say, luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. Take Obi-Wan's final duel with Vader. His most powerful moment wasn't a display of Force ability, but rather his choice to become one with the Force. Or look at Luke facing down the entire First Order without lifting a finger. These moments of transcendent understanding often proved more powerful than any display of Force acrobatics. Let's talk about the most complex relationship in the galaxy. And no, we're not discussing Han and Leia's courtship. The connection between the Jedi and the Force is like trying to explain color to someone who can only see in black and white while standing on your head in a hurricane. It's beautifully complicated, profoundly simple, and absolutely essential to understanding why a group of space monks with laser swords shaped galactic history. Imagine the Force as the galaxy's biggest group chat, except instead of emojis and cat videos, it's sending out the fundamental energies of life, death, and everything in between. The Jedi? They're the moderators who somehow got admin access. But here's the catch. They're not controlling the conversation. They're just trying to understand it, interpret it, and occasionally keep it from devolving into chaos. The Jedi viewed themselves as servants of the Force, not its masters, though trying to serve something that surrounds and penetrates all living things is about as straightforward as teaching a Hutt ballet. Their role wasn't to control the Force, that was more of a Sith thing, and how did that work out for them? But rather to listen to it, understand it, and help maintain its natural balance. But what does balance mean when we're talking about a cosmic energy field? That's the billion-credit question that kept Jedi Masters up at night. The old order interpreted balance as the dominance of the light side, viewing the dark side as a corruption rather than a natural part of the Force. Spoiler alert, that interpretation might have had a few flaws. As Luke Skywalker would later observe, balance isn't about eliminating darkness, it's about understanding its place in the greater whole. The Jedi's connection to the Force manifested in ways both spectacular and subtle. Sure, there were the obvious party tricks, telekinesis, mind tricks, the occasional gravity-defying acrobatics, but the deeper connection was far more profound. Jedi could sense disturbances in the Force across vast distances, communicate with nature itself, and even retain their consciousness after death, though the paperwork for that last one was apparently quite extensive. Take Force sensitivity itself. Being Force sensitive wasn't just about having fancy powers. It was about being tuned into the galaxy's underlying frequency. Imagine having a constant awareness of the energy flowing through all living things, feeling the ripples of events both near and far, and sometimes getting cosmic hints about what might happen next. Now imagine trying to focus on your daily tasks with all that going on. Suddenly, all that meditation training makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? The Jedi understood the Force as having two main aspects: the living Force and the cosmic Force. The living Force was the energy created by all living things, the here and now, the immediate reality of existence. The cosmic Force was the bigger picture, the grand tapestry of destiny and possibility. Balancing attention between these aspects was like trying to watch both a pod race and a game of Dejarik simultaneously. Tricky, but essential for understanding the whole picture. Qui-Gon Jinn was particularly attuned to the living Force, often frustrating the Council with his focus on the present moment rather than long-term consequences. But his understanding was so profound that he became the first known Jedi to discover the path to consciousness after death. Talk about having the last laugh in Council debates. The Jedi's role as guardians of peace and justice wasn't just a nice slogan for their business cards. It was a direct extension of their connection to the Force. They believed that by maintaining harmony in the galaxy, they were helping to maintain harmony in the Force itself. Every diplomatic mission, every peaceful resolution, every act of protection was, in their view, a service to the Force's natural balance. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Force itself seemed to have a sense of humor about balance. The Jedi spent millennia trying to maintain it, only to face their greatest challenge in the form of the Chosen One, who was supposed to bring balance to the Force. Plot twist: sometimes balance means knocking everything down and starting over. The Force works in mysterious ways, and occasionally those ways involve a healthy dose of dramatic irony. The concept of prophecy in Jedi philosophy was particularly fascinating. Through their connection to the Force, some Jedi could glimpse possible futures, though, as Master Yoda loved to remind everyone, always in motion, the future is. These visions weren't GPS directions to destiny. They were more like weather forecasts from a particularly cryptic meteorologist. The trick wasn't just seeing the future, it was understanding what to do with that knowledge. The Jedi's understanding of their role evolved over time. The old order, for all its wisdom, sometimes got caught up in its own traditions and interpretations. Luke Skywalker's new approach acknowledged the Force as something beyond simple light and dark divisions. Rey's eventual understanding went even further, embracing a more holistic view of the Force and the Jedi's place within it. Consider the Force dyad between Rey and Ben Solo, something not seen for generations. This wasn't just a powerful connection. It was the Force itself demonstrating that balance sometimes comes in unexpected forms. It was a reminder that the Jedi's role wasn't to dictate how the Force should work, but to understand and work with how it does work. The Jedi's practice of becoming one with the Force after death is perhaps the ultimate expression of their role. By transcending physical existence, they became pure vessels of the Force itself, able to guide and teach future generations. Obi-Wan, Yoda, Luke, each continued their service to the Force even after their physical forms were gone. So here we are, at the end of our journey through the history, philosophy, and occasional dramatic family disputes of the Jedi Order. What have we learned? Well, besides the fact that proper parenting could have prevented about half of the galaxy's major conflicts, we've uncovered the incredible complexity of what it truly meant to be a Jedi. From humble beginnings as Force-sensitive individuals discovering their connection to something greater, to the heights of their power as guardians of peace and justice throughout the galaxy, the Jedi story is one of constant evolution. It's a tale of triumph and tragedy, wisdom and hubris, spectacular victories and catastrophic failures, all wrapped up in those distinctive brown robes that somehow never went out of style. Think about it. Here was an order that managed to maintain peace in the galaxy for 1,000 generations, only to be undone by a particularly crafty politician with a talent for playing the long game. The Jedi weren't just peacekeepers. They were philosophers, warriors, diplomats, and occasionally reluctant generals. They were beings who could move mountains with their minds, but chose to spend most of their time trying to convince people to solve their problems through dialogue instead of destruction. The journey from Padawan to Knight to Master wasn't just a career path, it was a profound transformation of the soul. Each step required not just power, but wisdom, not just skill, but understanding. The trials weren't about proving you could swing a lightsaber well, though that certainly helped. They were about proving you understood what it meant to wield that power responsibly. As Master Obi-Wan once said, "Who's the more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him?" The Jedi path was about learning to be neither. Let's talk about those lightsabers for a moment. Not just elegant weapons, but perfect symbols of what the Jedi represented. A blade of pure energy, controlled and directed by wisdom and training, capable of both protecting and destroying. Like the Jedi themselves, lightsabers could be incredibly dangerous in the wrong hands, but were tools of protection and peace in the right ones. The fact that each Jedi had to construct their own lightsaber wasn't just tradition. It was a metaphor for building their own path in service to the Force. The Clone Wars marked both the height of Jedi influence and the beginning of their fall. Here they were, leading vast armies across the galaxy, their names becoming legendary even in the Outer Rim. And yet, this very prominence helped set the stage for their destruction. There's probably a lesson there about the dangers of mixing mystical orders with military command structures, but that's a debate for another holocron. The fall of the Order wasn't just about Order 66 and the rise of the Empire. It was about the culmination of various factors that had been building for centuries. The Jedi's own success had led to a certain rigidity in their thinking, a confidence that sometimes bordered on arrogance. As Yoda would later reflect during his exile, the Jedi had become so focused on maintaining the status quo that they'd lost sight of the Force's ever-changing nature. But here's the beautiful thing about the Force. It always seems to find a way to balance things out, even if that balance comes in unexpected forms. The rise of Luke Skywalker, the return of hope through Rey, the eventual re-establishment of the Jedi Order, these weren't just sequels in the galactic saga. They were reminders that the Force works in mysterious and often ironic ways. Who would have thought that the son of the man who helped destroy the Jedi would become their greatest hope for renewal? The new Jedi Order, both under Luke and later Rey, learned from the mistakes of the past while honoring its wisdom. They understood that attachment and emotion weren't necessarily paths to the dark side. They could also be sources of strength when properly understood. The rigid structures of the old order gave way to more flexible interpretations of what it meant to serve the Force. Sometimes the best way to honor a tradition is to allow it to evolve. Looking back at the most powerful Jedi section, it's worth noting that true power in the Force was never just about who could lift the biggest starship or pull off the most impressive mind tricks. The greatest Jedi were those who understood that power was meant to serve, not to dominate. Even Yoda, arguably the most powerful Jedi Master of the Old Order, was known more for his wisdom than his incredible Force abilities. Speaking of power, let's not forget the Jedi's fundamental role in maintaining balance in the Force. They weren't just cosmic peacekeepers. They were part of the Force's own mysterious plan for the galaxy. Every trial, every triumph, every tragedy served a purpose in the greater tapestry of the Force's will. Even the darkest moments, Order 66, the rise of the Empire, the destruction of Luke's temple, ultimately led to new understanding and growth. But perhaps the most important legacy of the Jedi isn't their powers, their achievements, or even their philosophy. It's the hope they represented. In a vast and often chaotic galaxy, they stood for the belief that wisdom, compassion, and justice could prevail over darkness and fear. Even in their darkest hours, this hope endured, passed down through generations like a lightsaber from master to apprentice.